Welcome to the Foster Friendly Podcast, where we come together to make a difference in the lives of children in foster care and the families who care for them. Foster Friendly communities are part of a nationwide movement by America's Kids Belong that helps people from all walks of life take action and help kids and families thrive. You'll hear from former foster youth, foster and adoptive parents, social workers, faith and business leaders, and other experts on how to engage in meaningful ways. Our hosts Brian, Travis, and Courtney explore inspiring stories of everyday people making a difference in foster care where they live and work.
All right, Travis, good to see you today. Today, we are going to talk about the sobering impact that being in foster care has on educational outcomes. So why are kids in foster care having such bad outcomes in schooling, and then what resources there are. And today, I'm excited because we have an expert on this topic and somebody who's beaten all the odds. Dr. Danisha Keating was in foster care, but today has her PhD. So I'm going to read her official introduction and bio, but then she's got a big personality. So we're going to let her speak for herself and share a little bit more about who she is and where she's coming from. So Dr. Danisha Keating is a CEO, international motivational speaker, and international author of From Foster to PhD, Letters from a Suitcase. Dr. Keating believes in the power of our stories and being able to share them to help others get out of their fires. As a research psychologist, Dr. Keating has a background in psychology, trauma-informed training and practices, and best practices for working with foster youth on their educational goals. As a former foster youth and guardian of 5 of her siblings, she firmly believes that no matter where we come from, we all have a goal we'd like to obtain, and we all need help from people around us. So, Danisha, Dr. Keating, great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I feel after hearing that, I'm already just inspired. I feel like you just have to stand up and clap already. But
I'm like, who is it? Who's going to stand up? Oh,
so coincidentally, Travis's son graduated from high school today.
Yeah, and
congratulations.
And formerly in foster care
youth.
Yes.
Yeah, adopted. So literally, as this timing and thinking of kind of the research and our conversation, I just sat even watching this going, wow, it's a whole nother level of just awe of overcoming.
People don't understand that there's a ton of barriers even for kids who have stability after experience with foster care. So if you get adopted or you are with your family, it's not something that you're sitting back going like, yeah, I'm good now. I had no educational hurdles or barriers to overcome. It is lifelong, because if your education at any point was interrupted, or it was you had to leave to go to court, or caseworkers were coming in, that is interrupting their ability to stay in and be focused. But then you add trauma onto that, and it doesn't matter if you were 2 years old when it happened or when you were 13 years old. That trauma still impacts you and affects you daily. And I think what's crazy is that most foster youth who are taken into foster care, they're put into school the very next day. And it's like, okay, go still function.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
how is this okay? How do we do that? Why do we do that? Why can't we give time for processing and ability to say, hold on, let's give some grace here? Because there are so many teachers out there that I've personally talked to foster youth who have said like, yeah, my teacher was like, yeah, get over yourself, it happens. And he's like, okay. And I'm like, yeah, I had teachers like that too, professors who just didn't care. They don't think foster care is a hurdle. They're just like, get over yourself and go. It's not a good foundation for us to have emotionally, and then say, go be successful in school. It's hard, but it's like for your son to be able to accomplish that, it is a massive deal, regardless of foster care or not. Like, graduation rates are low across the board, but even worse for foster youth.
So, we've already begun the topic and conversation, which is great. If we want to press pause for a second, already the passion coming out, it's great. Anything else you want to share about yourself, your family, and then you're a motivational speaker. So I'm curious, how does a motivational speaker find motivation?
Gosh, I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, am I the right person for this job? It is hard, because I think just for me as a person, I've always tried to battle that internal motivation that I lacked. And I remember moments of sitting in my car being like, this is going to be worth it. It's going to be worth it. And like pep talking myself. But that was because I saw other people doing that. They're like, you're your worst enemy sometimes. And you have to tell yourself that you can go and do and be. But I had no idea my journey was going to be to a motivational speaker. My goal was be a professor because I was like, that's what I want, which I get to do. But then now I get to do all the extra stuff on top. So some of the things, like I have a toddler. She's almost 2. I still have my youngest brother with me. He's 21. I'm married. Do lots of stuff for church, things like that. Love doing worship or singing songs. Those are always fun things. I love reading. But for motivation, I'm always listening to other people because it's, even the best motivational speaker out there, the funniest comedian or the best actor, actress, they have to learn from somebody. And that's where we dig into other people's energy sometimes to be like, okay, what can I get to get hyped up again to go back out and be? So I listen to a lot of different people, and sometimes it's just little things like watching my favorite Disney movie or watching like a love story where it's just like you watch it and you're like, oh, that's inspiration in a different way. There's like levels to being inspired, I think, and creativity is what really inspires motivation. But one of the things I've always struggled with is finding that motivation when you're on burnout is the hardest. And that's when we tap into other resources of somebody else saying, hey, I've had a hard like life on this and I've battled this, but you got to keep going. And someone said, stop looking for the motivation because it's not going to come. You have to be consistent. Your consistency is what's going to get you the longevity. Your motivation will come later. And that's when I started sitting back going, oh, okay. I've been trying to find this motivation and not, working out or not studying or not doing what I needed to do because motivation comes later. But the consistency is what gets you to that motivation down the line.
So, Danisha, I'm fascinated by the title of your book, and I want more people to pick it up. Both the title and the subtitle. So you got from foster to PhD, and then the subtitle is Letters from a Suitcase. So, why don't you share with our audience what your book is, what's it about,
Yeah.
and what they could get out of it.
So the title in itself is one of those, it was kind of hard to figure out from what to put down on it, but I was like, my journey is from this to that. And so that's where the from foster to PhD came in. But the letters from a suitcase is literally where I pulled my journal letters from was
Mm-hmm.
my suitcases because I had lived from home to home. I went through 33 different addresses from 18 to 24 years old. And I
Wow.
lived in boxes and suitcases from my car. So when I started unpacking, I had like journals, loose letters, books that I had for school that I wrote into the back, like frustrations or whatever. I would pull them from the suitcases that I had been living from. And I started seeing them and I was like, wow. And it kind of hit like that title was probably like 19 or 20 years old, where I had letters from a suitcase, where I was like, I want to write a book, but what would it be? And it was like, oh, I really like that. But it wasn't until I was 31 where I was like, these two things go together because I'm literally pulling my letters from these suitcases that I've lived from for so long. Um, and then literally 28 years old was the first time I unpacked every box in my home. Before
Mm-hmm.
I would leave boxes in there. So as I was pulling material to put in this book from past writings to myself, I was pulling them out and being like, oh my gosh, I didn't even remember that this was here. And that the whole focus was trying to not just shine light on the abuse details, because I pulled a lot of that out because I said I don't want people to know. First off, I don't want people to know that information, but secondly, I
Mm-hmm.
don't want people to focus just on my trauma. I want people to focus on the emotions of what it's like to go through education, especially as
Mm-hmm.
a foster youth. I wanted them to see what that really felt like, even parts of like raising my siblings. Not that it was the situation in itself to be like, wow, that was really hard, but the emotion that happens when your van breaks down and you have no money to fix it and you got to get to work and get the kids to school. And it's like, I wanted people to understand like there's an emotion behind what we feel. And if we could see that, we can understand why it's such a big deal when we feel like we're going to fail or not get to our finish line as a foster youth or a person just trying to get to their goal that they haven't been able to. Because a lot of people at that point and currently will hear details of my story and go, Danisha, you went through a lot. Like, how much of that did you cause? And I'm like, well, not a lot of it. Okay, but thank you for the question. But it was I wanted people to really see, like, what was I struggling with emotionally during those times, and not speaking it from a place of hindsight or wisdom, but more of like in it with me, because I think that is more important. Is when I have this information at 34 years old now, I didn't have that same information at 18, 19. So the mistakes that I made would not have been different because I didn't have that information.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So anyone can buy it on Amazon, and it's there for the buying.
So when you were writing it, who were you imagining you were writing it to? Who's the audience? And when it's all said and done, when they close the last page, what are you hoping that they're going to come away with?
So I was first writing it for foster youth themselves, to be like, I want to motivate you to understand that I felt these things too. Because when I come in to
Mm-hmm.
speak, a lot of the times people are like, so you just didn't give up? And these are former foster youth or foster youth currently. And they're like, so, did you know that you would get to this spot? And I'm like, I had no idea. Like, I had 300 different educational plans I mentally shifted through. I sat down multiple times being like, I hope this is worth it. I hope that this is the right path. I don't know if I'm
Mm-hmm.
choosing the right thing. So I wanted foster youth to be able to look at this and go, okay, if I have a dream, if I have a goal, it's not going to be easy. Already know that, but it is doable. But then I wanted others who were in the education realm to stop just saying, hey, foster youth can just do it. They just need to apply themselves. I wanted them to
Okay.
see behind the mirror and say, like, oh, I can see the person standing here where I see the hope and potential. But when you open that door to say, okay, there is this person behind this door who is not feeling that they're going to make it because they're not there yet. They haven't grown in that way educationally, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, or financially. We have different tools in our belt when we're not in that season. So I wanted people to understand, like, there's a lot of emotion that when a foster youth comes in and they're trying to get cleared for financial aid for college, and you say you need 3 documents that I cannot obtain as a foster youth, I want people to know why there's an emotion behind it and a response of the spiral that tends to happen. Why do they freak out going, oh, I can't get there. I'm not going to make it now. I'm not going to get my degree. There's so much more wrapped into this, that it's not just an inner child that's coming out. It is legitimately like, my future hangs in the balance. And if I mess up, none of this comes into play because everything has messed up in my life. Nothing has gone well. So then they get to that last page, and it's the question, like, I actually debated going and putting this in, but I'm glad I did. Where I'm at graduation and I'm like, oh my God, am I going to make it? Like, is this going to happen? Like, did I do the right thing? And am I going the right direction? And still fighting imposter syndrome years
Mm.
later, because that's still a feeling that comes up where it's, when rejection happens, it still hurts. When someone says, hey, we're going to bring you in and now you're not going to do our speaking event, you still go, oh, what did I do? That's normal feelings. And my hope is that when someone reads through this, foster youth or not, if they have fought with those emotions internally, they can say, you know what, I'm going to still try. Because if she can do it and she battles the same thought process that I do, and she's still
Mm-hmm.
there, I can too. And I can still work through my thought process. And it doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you bad. It doesn't mean you're not successful. Like, the most successful people in the world, they battle with emotions. And I'm hoping that people get that from this.
Mm. That's interesting. So much of what you hear about the challenges for educational achievement, so much of it is around just kind of the fact of there being disruptions and stuff. And I love how you're
Mm-hmm.
exploring the emotional side of it.
Yeah. And it's needed, because I think that that's the side that does not get shown a lot. Is it's, again, most of the stories you will read about foster youth, it's usually the trauma and the details of the trauma that they explored, and those are good to know because we need to know them. We need to be moved into action. But I think sometimes what tends to happen is it's so much information that people walk away going, it's hopeless, I have nothing. But if we understood the emotion behind what that action does, it's not about the person who did it to us or the situation itself. It's about what we feel. That's where we can step in and say, hey, as someone working with someone who comes from a hard past, I can look at you and say, hey, Brian, I understand that you're freaking out right now. We are going to find a solution together. You are not on your own. because the whole point of like an emotional response is you usually feel by yourself. And that way, if someone is working with someone from a hard past, they can come in and go, hey, these are the 3 things that are needed, and I'm going to help walk you through this. You're helping that person learn that you're trustworthy, and not just be like, well, go figure it out, it's easy, I can do it, you can do it too, because that's not the case with a lot of young adults who have been removed from family and they don't have legal documents that they do need.
Wow. Well, let's pivot a little bit into back the transitory nature of foster placements and that sort of movement. And this is kind of some stats that kind of showcase this for people that aren't aware just how staggering this is. One fairly recent national study showed that kids in foster care typically move schools at least once or twice a year. Each move then results in a loss of 4 to 6 months of academic progress. 1/3 of all those who age out, around 23,000 annually, will have seen as many 5 or 6 school moves. So then the fallout of those things are that just over 50% of former foster youth graduate high school compared to their peers at around 90%, which you already brought up, Danisha. And then the other thing is less than 8% of former foster youth receive a post-secondary degree, again, compared to about 50% of the national public of their peers.
Right.
So I guess this is where this just seems like such an intimidating sort of thing to unpack, but I really want to kind of hone in on what you think are some insights here, because as many foster parents know this firsthand. They know, Jimmy came in, he's so far behind. It just seems so overwhelming when we're already dealing with the trauma of just our daily existence in the house and trying to get through that stuff. Then on top of that, to almost try to catch up these education gaps for many probably seem, that's just almost an impossible goal. And yet that not necessarily is the case. So what are kind of your thoughts around, like, obviously the support is a piece here, but anything around this current existence with this problem for kids in care and being bounced around?
Yeah, that when you say 4 to 6 months of not having something when they are moved, they lose 4 to 6 months of school. I think that's such a, like, that breaks my heart, because it's 100%. It just sucks. There's no other word for it. It just sucks, because you tell a kid, okay, you're going to be moved, you're going to go to a new school, or maybe even continue at the same school that you're at, but you're going to have an interruption, but it's going to impact you 4 to 6 months from now. Then there is this pressure of, well, now you have to catch up. You need to apply yourself. You need to behave well. You need to go in and pass this quiz, with a gap of 4 to 6 months not existing of education. And that like, I sit back in that and I had a teacher who told me this, and I was really I was in high school, and I was like crying, because I'm like, man, I'm not smart enough. I'm never going to get math. I just can't do this. And she's like, Danisha, you missed an entire semester of your freshman year. Your parents did not get you to school in middle school or elementary school. All of your high school education is built on the middle school and elementary school that you did not have. You are never going to catch up. And I was like, so what's the point? And she goes, I'm not telling you to quit. What I'm telling you is stop trying to catch up. That's not going to happen. What you're going to do is you're going to fill in the gaps of what you need to know with this current information, but you're not trying to get back the years of school, the 8 years of schooling you did not get. You're simply going to focus on, what do I need for this lesson for today to pass this quiz? And I sat back and I like had a moment of realization, like, I'm never going to get to catch up. Okay. But that was a release for me, because I was beating myself up before that. But now I'm like, okay, I just need to learn about what I need to learn today. I don't need to learn the last 8 years and try to catch up the last 8 years. Am I going to pass trigonometry? Nope. Not going to happen. Can I try to pass elementary algebra? If I take a couple classes over and over again and get the tutoring that I need. It really comes down to, when you recognize there's a gap, you're not saying, well, all is lost. But what you're saying is, I need to stop putting the pressure on a foster youth to say, now you need to catch up for what you missed, because you're never going to catch up. But what you can do is say, okay, what can we teach you today to be successful in the class that you're currently in? What can we teach you just to help you with this lesson? And if we have time, we'll go and start working backwards. But we need to kind of sit in that to say, like, when a foster youth graduates high school and they piece together their education and say, okay, now you have a diploma, go to college somehow, you're still having these holes in the education. When you're able to sit back and just say, you know what, you're going to have a hole. You're going to do justice for that person better, because you're not saying you're stupid, you can't get this, you're not going to learn. It's my dyslexia. I used to blame my dyslexia for everything, and it was my professor's like, girl, this is beyond dyslexia. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, you have holes in your education. Look at the quiz that you took. And he goes, you're not stupid, dude. And he said it just like that. And I was like, whoa, your professor saying dude. And he just said, he's like, you just never had this. And so if we recognize that with other foster youth and we start letting them know, like, hey, we're going to help fill in the gap of what you're missing, we will never have you be able to catch up. You're not going to, because when you think catch up, I think of like what I was trying to do was, okay, give me my brother's 8th grade. I had several brothers and a sister that were younger. I would sit with them as they were doing their elementary and middle school math and say, okay, walk me through your packets. Let me absorb this. And my brain was not able to retain all that information. It can't retain all that information. But what I could do is say, okay, brother, I need you to show me how you did this problem, because I have a similar problem in my math class. Can you show me how to do this? And then over time, I'm able to start filling in the gap with that knowledge, but it's not going to be a retained knowledge going forward. So when we work with foster youth, being able to say like, hey, I'm going to help you fill in those gaps. You're working on this. Don't try to catch up from last year that you lost, but let's look at this lesson right here. Let's show you what you need to have. Let's piece it together for now. And then later we'll start working on it more. A lot of foster youth have told me, like, I hate school because I'm not smart enough. I can't learn this. If you looked at my high school GPA, you'll see all of my core classes for, math, English, and science, they were like D's and C's. But all of my academic curricular activities, all of the fun stuff, were A's. That was the only reason I went to school, was choir and dance and like and color guard. But I had to take math and English and science. But you see that the A's kind of help keep me in, because I have to have an A and a 2.0 to be able to stay in those classes for choir and color guard, because that was a requirement for my teachers. But then you have these math and science stuff, and I'm like, wow, I thought I did better, because I was loving what I was learning, but I stopped putting that pressure on catching up. I was never going to catch up. I'm still never going to catch up. Like, I still have a hole in my education, and I have a PhD, and people point it out all the time. They're like, oh, look at your spelling error. Oh, you have a PhD. You should be ashamed of yourself. You should be more academically professional. And I'm like, I'm going to have misspellings. I do have dyslexia. It messes with me all the time, but I'm going to have things where I say it wrong. I'm going to remember statistics wrong, but guess what? I'm not going to go home and beat myself up because I accidentally said something incorrect. I'm going to correct myself, but I'm not going to beat myself up like somebody else would.
Yeah, Danisha, in addition to the holes in your education, it seemed like from my experience as a foster dad that kids would come into our lives and they do have these gaps, but they also had, like, just, you could see that they had so much more on their mind of like, where am I? I'm in survival mode. And they just like, I don't have space to learn this academic thing when I'm trying to make sure, am I safe? Am I going to be fed? And so there's that additional challenge that most youth don't think of at all. They assume all those good things that are going to happen to them. So talk about that a little bit.
And I think that's super important to talk about too, because it's like, for me, when I looked at kind of my file, I went into foster care on a Saturday and I didn't go to school until Monday the next, like, they had me enrolled in another school. And then
how old were you when that happened?
It was 3 days before my 16th birthday.
Okay.
So my younger siblings were a lot younger. They were from 4 years old so we were from 4 to 15, all of us. And they were expected to be back in school that following Monday. And it was like, okay, nothing happened. And then you don't get to talk about it. But then it's like, here's a quiz, here's this. And I just remember sitting there And when it happened, it was October. And so we were prepping for some state testing, and I was prepping for midterms. And I remember like my teacher handing me my midterm. And I just looked at her and I just broke down crying. And I was just like,
Mm,
I don't have my book. I don't have my
mm,
backpack. I don't have
mm.
my pencils. I didn't study. And she's like, well, why didn't you study? And I'm like, how do I explain this to you? How do
Yeah.
I help you? How do I help you
Right.
understand where I'm at?
Yeah.
And that doesn't leave my teacher room to help me, but I'm being given this test and be like, okay, go, like, remember and I had completely spaced. She goes, girl, we've been doing this all semester. And I looked at her and she kind of took the paper away, and I was like, no, I'll do it. And she's like, let's talk over lunch. And I'm like, okay. And I went back and she's like, what's going on? So I told her, and she's like, your brain is not going to be able to do two things at once. And I was just
Right.
like, no, I can take it, it's fine. And she goes, I know you know this, but let's wait a minute so you can go and study and get some breathing room, and then you can come and take it when you're ready. And she let me take it like a week later. But it was that didn't happen after that. Everyone else was like, that was 2 weeks ago, that was a month ago, that was a year ago. But that still follows you, because I was still having my CPS worker come in every single week. I was failing a class because he kept taking me out of the same class every single time, every time it was quiz day. And I told him, like, please don't come in on Wednesdays, I have a quiz that day. Wednesday's quiz day. He
Mm-hmm.
did not care. So you ask someone to go in and be like, and I want people to just kind of imagine this is like, when you have been in the worst moment of your life, where was your brain functionality? What was your thought process? Were you able to work well? Were you able to have relationships with people? Were you able to even say, this is what I'm feeling and thinking? Now do that to a kid, do
Right.
that
That's
to a
powerful.
teenager,
Yeah.
and ask, like, what can I do as someone who's walking with someone in that? And the only answer is wait, take their lead, let them have space. They're
Mm-hmm.
processing a heavy moment. And in my worst moments, I've sat back and I'm like, I don't think of anything else. My work suffers, my relationships suffer. I pull back, I isolate, I sit back in that, and then over time I process. But when I was 15, I'm like, no wonder why I wanted to yell and scream and punch things and be in control of how I was, the big kid, tough kid walking around school, because it was the safe place that I could act and react and not always get pulled to the principal's office. I got pulled
Mm-hmm.
there multiple times, but some of my teachers are like, girl, you're going through a heck of a time. And they understood, and they'd even, some of my teachers like, girl, this isn't you. Go walk around, come back, and when you're ready to be you for a second, come back and we'll talk. And I'd always come back in and I'm like, I'm really sorry, I don't understand. But every teacher who did that understood there's this thing called trauma, and it's the delayed, like, there's a grieving process that we have to go through. And I think that's what we miss with foster youth is, it's like, oh, it's trauma. It's like, no, there's a grieving process our brain automatically will go through, being like, I'm angry today, I'm sad today, I'm depressed today, I'm happy today, I'm okay, I'm accepting it, I'm not. And that happens in our brain, is that it just flips around.
So, Denisha, if you could just give like one piece of advice to teachers and to foster parents, and to say, I wish you would know or do this so that it would benefit the child in their educational pursuit.
I think this needs to be a case by case basis. There are
Okay.
so many different situations that can happen. We're all so different in how we handle things. Some
Mm-hmm.
of us need to go on walks with people, while others of us need to go walks by ourselves. I had a friend, and it kind of shocked me to my core, because I was like, my GPA suffered, but he was valedictorian, and he went through the foster care system and then was homeless, and he was still valedictorian. His grades slipped and nobody asked a question at all.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knew he was homeless. Nobody stopped and said, hey, are you doing okay? Your grades are slipping. What's going on? And I think that we look too much for the grades to tell us that something's going on, that we just entirely miss the person. So if we look at every foster youth that we have the honor of walking with and just say, what is your need? What can I do for you? Do you want space? Do you want me to walk with you? Do you want me to shut up and stop talking? What do you want and need? We would do better for that individual because we're all so different. Like what works for me doesn't work for my brother. What works for me doesn't work for my friend. But for me, like I always pull back first and then like I engage when I want to. But other people are like, they need people close. And then there are some people who are like, let them just be alone, but don't ever like just walk away completely from any of us. Like we all have different ways of processing what we're going through.
So yeah, be a student of the youth,
Of the student. Of the student.
not just the subject.
Yeah.
And
that's hard. It requires a lot to walk, to do life with someone. I think, there's the academic side is important, but what's more importanter, I can say that because I'm a doctor, importanter is that we need community. And that is more important, like, than any GPA or any grade or any lesson that we're going to learn. We need to know someone's in our corner.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's really helpful to case by case. And then you've kind of brought us in the compassion side, looking at the deeper things, what matters sometimes much more beyond academics. But kind of back to the last thing around this, as far as like with parents and advocacy, I mean, obviously bolstering support in academics, whether it's tutoring, and this is where, communities wrapping around foster families is vital and significant. I mean, that could be one huge game changer. But I guess what I'm asking is there a posture foster parents should be taking where it is to look and advocate more about, at times, again, I'm generalizing here, but hold on, Jimmy isn't even caught up. Let's not look to pass him necessarily. Is it more to try to slow things down with teachers and things, or what does kind of advocacy look like?
I think it's really important to first talk to the foster youth themselves, because you holding me back is seen to me as I'm not good enough. And I always had said, like, I can get there, I can get there, I can get there. It was never going to happen. but there are moments that I just needed someone to look at me and say, what do you need? What do you want? Do you want another chance at this class? Do you want to just kind of write it off and be done with it? I think one of the things that's kind of powerful, and I hate homework, but I appreciate homework too, because that's where I do a lot of my learning. But there are times that foster parents will be like, no homework at all. And it's not a benefit to that child. But then when you look at the case by case and you're like, actually, this one kid, complete meltdowns, beating themselves up, saying that they're just saying really ugly things to themselves because that's what they are believing about themselves, is that sometimes it's to go, hey teacher, can we do something else for this person, because this is actually doing the complete opposite of helping this person learn. It is actually making them hate learning. And I think the biggest thing that we need to focus on is not just focusing on, well, you need to have this education. What is the value behind me getting it? What is the point of having education if I'm actually not learning anything? My goal as a parent is to teach every young adult that I'm working with that their story is from, if it's a foster youth, from foster to blank. What is their goal? I meet with a lot of foster parents who literally will be like, education is your only route. College is your only route. If you don't go to college, you're not doing yourself justice. You're failing yourself. You're too smart for that. And I ask them, like, what is their hobby? What do they like to do? And it always comes back as like, well, they like construction. They like art.
Yeah.
They like singing. They like this. And it's like, why don't you put all your forces behind that and watch them soar? Find what they're passionate about, because that'll help. Like with what I had was color guard and choir. That actually helped me motivate me to, well, I need to do better on this. Tutoring is in this, it's a need. But when we know that tutoring, I always assumed tutoring was actually for people who were stupid or couldn't get it, or they just weren't, this is what everyone around me was saying, like, oh, you have to go to tutoring. You're just tutoring. I didn't know my valedictorian at high school was going to tutoring until he told me. And I was like bawling, and I'm like, I don't want to go to tutoring. I don't want people to think I can't do it. And he's like, Danisha, do you know I've been in tutoring my whole life? And I'm like, what? He goes, how do you think I have straight A's? And I was like, because you're smart. He goes, it's because I go to tutoring. And I was like, what? Like, wow, there's a stigma around it. And if someone else can come in and say, did you know that I had to have tutoring? Did you know I needed counseling too? Did you know that I needed someone to vouch for me and speak on my behalf? But also the other side of it is bringing that foster youth forward and saying, how can I show you how to advocate for yourself? So their From
That's,
Foster to Blank story is so important. But the biggest issue that we have right now with foster youth is people go, well, they don't advocate for themselves in college because they never learned how. But teach them and show them that you're advocating for them in those rooms, because when they sit with you and see that, you go, no, teacher, we don't do the homework because there are a lot of, that's an emotional thing for us at home. And it's not because they can't do it, but it's hard. This stuff is not easy. I'm crying. I'm having a hard time. I want to make sure that I know how to do this with my student, but how am I supposed to do that? And then they go, oh, mom and dad don't really know. But oh, okay, I can learn, and they will start teaching you, because then they're like, oh, okay, you're having a hard time with this too, but now I'm learning how to advocate for myself, to not in a bully way, but in a way that's just like, hey, I want to learn how to speak for myself, and then let them have the reins.
yeah, gosh, I want to highlight a few things there. You see, there's some gold nuggets that one of the things I heard you say is, for every foster youth, make sure that there's from foster to blank, like your title of your
Yes.
book, and what is the blank that they need to fill in. And the other thing, or that was connected to that, was find out what they're passionate about, and then maybe that's what fills in their blank. You also said that we need to take away the stigma and the shame from asking for help and tutoring. And I want to
Yes.
make sure that that's highlighted. And then the other thing that I was like, oh, that's good too, is don't just advocate for the child, teach them how to advocate for themselves.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Well, and it's funny because I used to advocate in a very aggressive way. It's really bad, because that's what I
Mhm.
had learned from my parents. And when I say aggressive, it was just like, give me your manager and da da da, over the littlest things. When I started walking with other people and learning from other people, I learned advocacy was actually saying, hey, I'm not understanding this as the adult in the room. Can someone show me how to do it so that I can show them how to do it?
Mhm.
And then bringing them along. And my little sister said something to me that I went, guilty, but also, okay, we need to learn this as a parent. She said, what I don't like is walking in a room and feeling like everybody knows my ish before I had a time to tell them.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
sat back and I went, okay, what do you want me to share? And she goes, I would actually like to do the sharing. And I
Mhm.
said, okay. So I would ask, do you want me to go with you? Okay, your grade is slipping. Have you talked to your teacher about what you could do? Yeah. How did that go? Well, I didn't know how to say this, this, and this. Send an email. Oh, I can do that. Yeah, go ahead and send an email. Ask about this or this. It's like, oh, we're having a hard time in this group project. This person's not doing what they're saying they're going to do, and I don't want our grades to slip. So we're just going to pick up the stuff that this person didn't do. And I said, just go ahead and let the teacher know, and that's what's going on, and ask, like, what can we do to bring this person into our group and feel comfortable, because now what it looks like you're doing is helping that other person try to be a part of your group versus this is a problem person. And she went and advocated for herself, and her grade went from an F to an A, because this group project, just the teacher was being told one thing by one student and then the group was saying something different. But she was like, wow, that felt really good that I got to go in and do this versus you doing it for me. And as they get older, like, I started doing this with them in middle school, because I was like, they need to be an adult who can
Mhm.
advocate for themselves and call their doctor or their bank and be like, hey, this isn't okay, something's going on here, versus being a people pleaser and being like, no, we just have to accept that what happens to us. Like, no, like, you get to do that. But if we don't bring them along to show them that we also have a hard time speaking and advocating, that's harder. And there were times that my sister's like, you're really good at practicing, and then you freeze when you're in the moment. And I was like, because it's scary. And she's like, yeah, I struggle with that too. And my brother, same thing. And he was like, that's crazy that you, of all people, struggle. And I was like, I know, I'm pretty good with words until I'm scared. And that's where they got to see that. And they were like, oh, but what it does really is it helps them see like you are actually fighting for them. They're in the room with you versus being where we all have been on the outside in a room while everyone else is talking about you. So when my sister said, bring me in, like, I'd want to advocate for myself, I want to be the person taking that lead, I said, okay, but I'm going to also coach you to where it's not aggressive like I have been in the past, because I don't need to yell at people for a little thing. But there's times for that and there's times for not. So teaching our kids how to advocate, I think, is the most powerful thing that they can learn, because that's really what helps stand them up for standing up for themselves.
I'm living this out as you're saying that. I'm like, we have two boys adopted from foster care, and one's about to graduate, one's right behind him, junior. And just even in like their fast food jobs, these things come up that just happens with work, where something unjust or something happens. And I've noticed they're so quick to sort of just let an injustice or maybe it's a paycheck mistake or something, just let it be. And so that's really good advice to that in all realms. And I think sometimes with them, I wonder if being in foster care where everything was out of your control almost taught many kids that adversity, there's nothing you can do. I mean, because, on a big level, a lot of that wasn't anything you could do. And I wonder if over time that shapes you to where, okay, this is a much smaller adversity, but again, it's just, I'm so used to letting adversity just wash over me like a huge wave. It's just like, whatever.
Right. But let's talk about that, because I think that's super important, is that like, I want everyone listening to imagine being in a situation for years and people going, nope, you can't talk for yourself. Nope, you can't say anything. No, you can't make a decision. Shush. And then all of a sudden being like, okay, go. What choice? Where? What? Like, what choice am I supposed to make? Where am I supposed to go? How am I supposed to do this? And that happened for me, was that I went from making all the decisions in my family, not all of the decisions, but with my siblings and being their caretaker and getting us to school, literally physically getting into fights with my parents to get me to school and get us to school, that I would walk the kids to school and then walk to school. That was like an hour and a half to get there. And then foster care coming in and going, you can't say anything. If you mess up, if you do anything, I'm going to move you. And then I'm going to move your siblings. And now we're going to fight for you. We've made this decision on your behalf. And you're just like, you're not allowing things to happen to you. They're saying, if you say anything, if you're the loud voice in the room, you're a problem. And now you learn to be quiet and you learn to not ruffle feathers, because it's not going to make it just worse for you. It's going to make it worse for your siblings and or your parents. And then you move into, okay, now go be an adult.
Yeah.
Have fun.
That's really good.
How are we supposed to do that? And I lived it. So I'm like, oh my God, that, like, I used to think I was crazy, because I'm like, all my friends got this together. And my friend who's a pastor sat me down and he goes, Danisha, do you realize, like, you're not a normal college student. You don't have a community behind you. You don't have family behind you. If you make a mistake, you live your mistake. If you don't pay a bill, your bill gets shut off. You don't have mom or dad to save you. And he's like, girl, like, you don't have that security. And I'm like, yeah. And I was like, that's really rude to say, but he was so right. And he wasn't saying it to be rude. He was just like observing. And he's like, of course you're going to struggle. And I'm like, I'm not like normal college students. I'm out here fighting just to breathe. And that, I think, is when we start to really look at that and say, okay, don't make a decision ever. And then go out and make a decision at 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. Hopefully it's the right one, because no one has shown us before. That's why there's so many passive foster youth, I think, out there. Is not because we want to be, is because we have been forced to be. And then it's like, now go out and be an adult. Have fun.
Yeah. Before we close this down, there's one more thing that I'd love to learn about. You're currently making a documentary. That's interesting.
Yes.
It's called 33 Roofs.
Yep.
And so, that's an interesting title. So tell us about that and how listeners can support the film.
Yes. So 33 Roofs, we're going to be talking about my journey of being homeless and moving from 18 to 24, 33 different times when I aged out of the system. I literally, senior year of high school in the fall, was told, like, you're on your own. And I was like, okay, bye. Ended up moving over 33 times. But in this documentary, we're actually going to be going through the educational and homelessness barriers that foster youth face. We're highlighting organizations that help me along the way, churches, people, friends, teachers, and what we all can do to really help. Because I think when we hear about homelessness and educational barriers for foster youth, a lot of us kind of throw up our hands and we're like, we don't know what to do because it's hard. But what we need desperately is community. So we're going to be highlighting how community can step in and step up to help us as an adult former foster youth, and be the love and support that we need so that those educational barriers that we do face can be overcome. Because I would not be here today if it wasn't for my church family. I would not be here today without the friends that came along the way, the professors, the teachers, the people, Google. I mean, I can't thank Google, but whatever. It's not a person, it's just a thing. But it's true. Like, hey, thank you, person who created Google. But it is, my hope is that people can leave this going, you know what? I can't foster, but what I can do is I can invite this former foster youth into my home for dinner and just show them how to do financial aid. I can show them how to do time management. I could show them how to build a resume. I can show them that they're loved and cared for, and that's it. So one of the biggest ways that we need support is if you go to DanishaKeating.com and put your email in. We need a big email list so that way streaming services can see that there are people who want to see this. And I won't spam you. I will only give you updates, but we are done with production and they're editing right now. And it has been such a labor of love, but also a moment of sitting back going like, this is not normal to do something like this. This is a pretty big deal. And I'm excited because it will highlight the barriers that we face, but the ways that people can help. So that way people leave encouraged to be like, here's how I can support somebody in my life.
All right. So DanishaKeating.com.
Yep.
Great.
And just click there, put your email in, and let's get a big email list.
That's very cool.
Very cool. So we'll have that. We'll have links to that. We'll have links to anything else we want to mention here, the book. Where can people follow you on Instagram? And
so all across the board, it's Dr. Danisha Keating on social media. The only difference is for Facebook, it's spaced between Danisha and Keating, but everything else is Dr. Danisha Keating. You can also just go to DanishaKeating.com and click on each one of the little icons for the social media and follow me there.
Great. Well, Danisha, it is a pleasure to meet you. You've got a great personality. You got a smart heart too. Just a real sensitivity towards seeing people individually. So I'm very grateful for the wisdom you shared.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for all the things that you guys are doing. It's incredible to be a part of your guys' community.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, will you help us reach more people by subscribing, sharing the podcast with a friend, and leaving a 5-star review? If you've been inspired by what you've heard today and want to learn more of how you can make a difference for kids in foster care and the foster families where you live, visit americaskidsbelong.org. We depend on individual donors to fund our work. We'd be grateful if you would consider joining us as a monthly donor. Visit americaskidsbelong.org to make your tax-deductible donation. Thank you. Together, we can ensure a family for every child in foster care and a foster-friendly community to ensure every foster family feels loved and supported.